My name is Kim Woody, and I am the head volleyball coach here at UW-Eau Claire. I also work in the athletics department with compliance and eligibility. So most of you will see me during your introductory meeting with your team. I also have Leslie Huntington here, who's our senior women's administrator, and then she also works with compliance and eligibility as well. So you'll see both of us. We kind of help to get you on the right path as far as your eligibility and getting started with Blugold athletics. Perhaps the first thing that we should talk about is just to make sure you're in the right place today. These are the sports that are offered through our athletics department. We have a lot of sports on our campus that are run through our recreation department, and so those are club sports. But if any of the sports that you're interested in are not on the screen right now, you really don't need to be here. We're going to talk a lot today about how to make sure that you're eligible this fall, some information regarding scheduling for your classes today, and primarily what you need to know in order to be ready to go for your first year of Blugold athletics. So we certainly encourage you to ask questions as we go through, and then we'll have time at the end to answer any questions that you might have. If you have a 1 o'clock registration appointment, feel free to get up and head out. We also will be here afterwards. If you have questions that you want to maybe ask just in private, or that maybe don't apply to everybody, we can certainly answer those as well. The first thing, if you have not already had contact with the head coach in the sport that you're interested in, you need to do that immediately. Yesterday would be good. We are in full planning mode for this fall. If you haven't contacted your coach, the best way to get a hold of them is to email them at this point. Most of our coaches are not on campus in the summer, so email is the best way to get a hold of them. If you've had contact and you've received a reply from your coach, then you're going to be in good shape. If some of them are already sending out information regarding their fall seasons, if you have gotten that, you're in great shape. If not, make sure you get on your list for the coaches. There will be really important information coming to you, both from your coach and from Coach Huntington, with regards to your eligibility, and so you want to make sure that you're on that list so that you don't lose any practice time or miss out on a tryout opportunity perhaps. What we need to make sure that you understand is that Blugold Athletics is an NCAA sponsored program, and as such we compete at a really high level in Division III. That said, we have a great time. It's a lot of fun, but it is competitive and not so much recreational, as opposed to maybe a club sport where they're not practicing as often, or certainly intramurals, which is really just about wellness and getting out and having fun and socializing. Our athletics department finished 15th in the Learfield Directors Cup this year out of over 400 Division III teams. So we definitely place a high premium on success and postseason competition, and so that's really important that you understand as you go into your experience with Blugold Athletics that we, as a competitive program, we have squad size limits. There are cuts. Most, if not all, of our coaches are out recruiting and have certain expectations for their athletes, both skill-wise and off the court as well, or off the field. We hold our student athletes to a higher standard than a typical student. With regard to their GPAs, there are athletics eligibility requirements, but then I think each sport certainly has, we expect our student athletes to represent our program to the highest ability in the classroom as well, and in the community. And there are also behavioral expectations that we expect. Social networking sites, I'll tell you right now, clean up your Facebook accounts. Make sure you know everything that you're going to put out there is going to be public knowledge. You and I, Coach Huntington and I, the rest of your coaching staff, we don't have time to be checking up on your social networking sites, but that doesn't mean that that information doesn't get back to you. And I'm sure you've heard enough stories about how some of that stuff can affect you down the road. So just make sure that you know that we want to make sure that you're always holding yourself in the highest regard possible. Class attendance, respect for our faculty, those are absolute musts. There are going to be times where you will probably miss classes as a result of your participation in athletics to compete, to go to a competition. And so attendance at class and participation in class are very, very important so that you can be successful in those classes. And then the last thing would be that the time commitment that you're going to be expected to put in is very, very significant. We have not only your practice requirements and your competition requirements, you do need to maintain a certain GPA. You will be asked to do some fundraising for your sport and for the athletics department. And all of our teams do participate in some community service to give back to the community. The Eau Claire community is tremendously proud and supportive of the athletics department. And so we really feel like it's our place to make sure that we give back to the community. So all of our teams are doing some things either within their seasons or outside of their seasons to make sure that we're doing some community service as well. The start dates for your sports, we have some teams that start practice early before school starts, and so they will have early report dates. In fact, there's the first 7 sports that are listed all report before school starts. It's important that you're in communication with your coach to know what the procedure is for coming early. In most cases, you're going to check in and stay in temporary housing, either on campus or I believe in the case of soccer, I think they stay off campus with returning players. But talk to your coach about what that entails. Typically, you'll move into a temporary room, and then I believe the date is August 25th where you'll move from your temporary room into your regular room. If your sport starts after school starts or September 3rd or later, then you will move in with the freshmen. I believe August 30th, I think, is the date. It's that Thursday before Labor Day weekend is when freshmen move in. Does anyone have any questions so far on start dates or anything? Yes? Yes. Yep, the RAs are there. The question was, are the RAs there when the students move to their permanent rooms? Yes, I think the RAs report the week before the 25th and have their training that week, and then they will be in their rooms on the 25th as well. One thing with moving in early, I would definitely suggest that if you do report early, that you make plans to only bring what you need for your preseason camp or tryouts, that you not bring all your dorm stuff, because if you're having to move from one dorm to another and maybe your refrigerators and your TVs and all that stuff, it's just really cumbersome. So just bring what you need for practice for those first couple of weeks. If you're in football, that's going to be a couple of weeks of practice gear, and well, you really won't need a whole lot because they'll give you practice gear, but then you can bring the rest of your stuff on the 25th. Sure. The question was, if you move in early but after August 25th, so cross-country women's golf, yes, you would move directly into your permanent room. And so in that case, yes, you would bring all of your stuff at that point. You could do that. Any other questions about that? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Huntington, and she's going to talk you through kind of the nuts and bolts of what you need to do to get ready to compete this fall.
So my turn to step into the spotlight. But what do you need to know right now? So you're getting ready to come in the fall, and what things do you need to know right now? First of all, you're going to be required to have a physical exam. And maybe you've already done that, but you have to have a physical exam within 6 months prior to starting your collegiate sport. And you have to have one for collegiate participation. The other thing about the physical exam is that we have a certain form that you have to use. It's available on our website. The other place that you can get that physical form is from your coach. Just ask them to email it to you. And that's the form that's required. If you turn in a high school form, which happens sometimes, that's not going to be accepted. So you need to have our physical exam form. And another thing with that is, for starting this year, sickle cell testing is required. So if you've had your physical already and you didn't get sickle cell testing done, you're going to need to go back and get that done. For sickle cell testing, the NCAA is making a big push to make that required, and so our athletic training staff believes that that's going to be a requirement from the NCAA in another year, and so what we're trying to do is get a jump on it with the incoming freshman class. So make sure to pay attention to that. It says right on the form in big bold letters, required. So that's just something to make sure and point out. Also with regard to the physical exam, in addition to it being on our form and the sickle cell testing, there are 3 medical practitioners that you're able to use, an MD, a DO, or a PA. If you have your physical done by a nurse practitioner, for example, or a chiropractor, that's not going to be accepted. So it has to be one of those 3 practitioners. And then also, don't mail it in to a general mailing address on campus. If you do that, it could end up anywhere. And that's happened frequently in the past. If you're going to turn that in ahead of time, please mail it directly to your coach, or even scanning it and emailing it will work. But if you mail it to a general UW-Eau Claire address, it could end up in the registrar's office, it could end up in the business office, it could end up in student health services. We have no idea. So it's just best. Actually, my recommendation would be hang on to it and turn it in at your very first team meeting. That's really the best way to make sure that it goes through as few hands as possible and it gets right where it needs to be. So that'd be my recommendation. Other things that you need to be aware of. As Kim said, I'll be sending information out to you approximately 10 days to 2 weeks prior to your season starting. And that information is going to require you to log in to fill out some online forms. Things like emergency contact information, insurance information, which is going to include policy numbers, those types of things, immunization records. You're going to have to do a medical history online, and those types of things. Those are all kept in our athletic training department's database. So your first year, it's quite a bit of work to get it all done. But after your first year, all you have to do is go in and update it. So it requires a lot less time after your first year. With that said, it's important for you to start getting familiar with using your UW-Eau Claire email, because that's the email address that you're going to get sent this stuff to. So you need to familiarize yourself with that, and as we get into August, you need to start getting comfortable with checking that email address if you're not already, because that's where a lot of important information is going to be sent to. Any questions about that so far, the physical or the online forms? Yes? Okay, good question. The question was, is the urinalysis optional and the blood work optional? The only thing that's absolutely required down at the bottom of that form is the sickle cell testing. So the urinalysis is optional. Yes.
And actually, if I can just interject, if you printed the form off more than 2 or 3 weeks ago, there's a new form now that has the sickle cell requirement on there. So that they just updated, our athletic trainer just updated that form right at the end of the school year. So if you did it, 2 or 3 weeks ago, it wasn't on there.
Okay. Also with the medical history that you're going to do online, it's very, very important that you're thorough with that medical history. And one reason specifically is because if you have been diagnosed with ADD or ADHD and you're on prescription medication for that, it's of utmost importance that that's properly documented. The reason for that is, once again, the NCAA has cracked down on this, and they have a very strict documentation process in place. Kim mentioned before that we finished in 15th in the Director's Cup out of 435 schools. With a finish that high, that means that we're going to postseason a lot. When you go to postseason, drug testing is very common. So if you're drug tested in the postseason and something that you're taking for ADD, ADHD shows up positive on a drug test and you don't have the proper documentation in place and on file, you're going to lose 365 days of eligibility. And there is going to be nothing that anybody can do to help you, to get you out of it. Okay? The proper documentation is what you need. If you have that in place and you're drug tested and the test comes back positive for this medication, you'll be fine. But if you don't have the proper documentation, there's nothing anybody is going to do to get you out of 365 days of being ineligible. So my best advice to you is, if this applies to you, when you get on campus and you have your team meeting and one of the athletic training staff people is at that team meeting, talk to him or her about needing help documenting your medication. And they will help walk you through what you need to do to get that done the right way. Okay? But I can't emphasize that enough. Don't let it be you that this happens to. Just take care of the documentation and you'll be fine. Insurance, it is an NCAA requirement that you have a minimum of $90,000 of insurance coverage. And I always recommend at this point that if you're not sure what your coverage is, or it's always a good time to go back and review and make sure that your insurance actually covers intercollegiate athletic injuries. Because there are some policies that will say exception intercollegiate athletic injuries. So it's always a good time to go back and review and just make sure that that policy is going to cover that ACL tear, okay, or something like that. That stress fracture from a distance runner. It's always a good idea to make sure that your insurance is going to cover that.
Your private insurance may also offer a rider for it. So that may be the first place to start. If you realize that it's not covered currently under your regular policy, inquire about a rider within your own insurance company first before you may need to come and get student insurance here.
Another option that actually several of our student athletes have used in the past is there's an insurance company here in town called Southern Insurance. And they offer insurance policies for our athletes. These rates that are up here right now are last year's rates, but I can tell you that from the previous year to these rates that are up here, they barely went up at all. So as far as that being relative to the rates that might be in place this year, I don't have that information yet, but that's what they were for the last academic year. And you know, that's not a problem. They're easy to work with. They work quickly. So if you do need insurance, that might be a good option. Since the NCAA requires the insurance coverage, we have to figure out a way to verify that you have insurance coverage. And so to do that, our policy is we're going to require that you turn in a front and back copy of your insurance card that's been Xeroxed so that we can keep that on file in our athletic training department. So what we ask that you do is on one sheet of paper, get that copy front and back made, and then again, that's something that you can turn in at your very first team meeting. You don't have to worry about that ahead of time.
All right, so now to get our student athletes' attention back, because this is really what you're going to be doing today. You're going to be registering for your classes. I hope that you all have selected some classes that you're excited about. If you're not excited about them, you have about 2 months to get excited about them. The big thing you have to remember is the magic number is 12, okay? You need to register for at least 12 credits to be a full-time student, and that also correlates to being eligible for athletics. You have to be in 12 credits at all times to practice or compete. Okay, so for you this fall, you all will need 12 credits to practice or compete. If you ever drop below 12 credits this fall, or actually throughout your athletics career unless you need fewer than 12 credits to graduate in your very last semester, that's the only time there's an exception, you will need to be in 12 credits. So I get a report every day that tells me if anybody has dropped below 12 credits. There's been times where I've had to go to wrestling practice or go to basketball practice and say, Coach, sorry, this person cannot practice today. They are not in 12 credits. So don't let that be you, okay? The moral of the story there is if you're going to do any changes with your schedule, which is very common, if you get into a class, you just realize, you know what, I really don't want to be in this class, add before you drop. You're going to become familiar today with our registration system. It's very quirky, okay? But you'll see it's basically a shopping cart. And you put everything in your shopping cart, and then you say, I want to submit this. You need to add before you drop so that you always stay above 12 credits. Okay? I would also highly recommend that if you're considering a schedule change, before you do anything, you talk to your coach. Okay? So that they're aware that there's some changes going on and they can help guide you through that process. If you come up with a schedule that may have some conflicts with practices or games, if you're going to be leaving early for competitions, what you need to know is that if there's a conflict between class and practice, you must go to class. It's a violation from the NCAA if you miss class to go to practice. Missing class to go to a competition is excused by the university, and so there are certain things that our coaches want you to do in order to make sure that you can make up your work, your professors know you're going to be gone, but those are excused absences for competition or for travel to competition. If your schedule doesn't work out, where you feel like there's some overlap between practice time or class and practice time, if you can't figure out a compromise or a solution to that, that's okay. We recognize as coaches that you're a student first and then an athlete, so we know there may be some conflicts. As freshmen, I'm going to tell you though, I think you can probably find a way to make your schedule work so you don't have those conflicts. Most of our conflicts happen with our upperclassmen who need certain classes to graduate. There may only be one section offered, and that's when we run into problems. But usually with freshmen taking a lot of general education requirements, you can work your class schedule around when your practices are. In just a little bit, I'll put up a slide that shows when your practice schedules or when your practices are if you don't already know that. Make sure that your advisor or the person who's going to walk you through your registration today, if they know that you are going to be an athlete or that you're desiring to be an athlete, that you should tell them that so that they know that you have a little bit of a time constraint to work with. You don't just have a free open schedule to work around. A common question that we get from student athletes is, how many credits should I take? 12 credits is the minimum, but if you take 12 credits every semester, you're going to take a minimum of 10 semesters, 5 years to get out of here. And I know especially the parents who are financing this little endeavor, you're probably interested in how do I get done in 4 years or as close to that as possible. I would recommend looking at how you can take the most credits possible that are going to give you the best chance for success. And all I can say is that is an individual decision. Some student athletes, 12 credits is absolutely the most I would ever recommend that they would take. Some students can take 15, 16, even maybe 17 credits, and they're going to do really well. You have to be good at time management. You have to be diligent with your studies. I think somebody maybe has said this to you already today. If you have 15 credits, you're going to spend 15 hours in class in that week. The expectation on average is that for every credit you're in class, every hour you're in class, you're spending 2 hours outside of class preparing for that class. So that's 15 credits in class, 30 hours outside of class. So you're up to 45 hours of your week solely dedicated to schoolwork for 15 credits. If you then add on 25 or 30 hours of athletics participation, including practices, games, travel, you're looking at approximately a 70 to 80 hour a week job, okay? So consider that. We often talk about many sports, volleyball, softball, for example, have a traditional season, an in-season, and then an out-of-season. So we kind of encourage our volleyball players to be conservative in the fall with their credits and then maybe load up on their credits in the spring when they're not in season and traveling every weekend. Okay? Softball's just the opposite. Their in season is the spring, so they load up in the fall and then take fewer credits potentially in the spring. Also consider that this is a big transition time in your life. I think you want to make sure that you realize that it might be harder than you think. In fact, it probably will be harder than you think to get good grades. Many of our student athletes come to us and they're A students, B students, and they get here and they struggle because they haven't actually done this whole college thing. They haven't had to manage their time. They've been in classes for 30 hours a week instead of 15, and now their time is more structured. Your time is less structured in college. That doesn't mean you don't have to do as much work or more work. One thing too to think about, if you register for 15 credits and you go to the first week of class and you get all of your syllabi, which are the course outlines, and you realize, this is more work than I think I can handle, you then still have the option to drop a 3-credit class and still have 12 credits. So there's a little safety net there. If 15 would get you out, if you take 15 every semester, it's 4 years. But that gives you a little cushion. You can always say, you know what, I don't need that 3-credit econ this semester, I can take it next semester. Or a 3-credit class, you could always go down to 12. All right. Because the NCAA and the conference realize that freshmen do have this transition period, the requirement is that out of the 12 credits you're required to be enrolled in, you really only need to earn 9. So they're giving you a little bit of a buffer zone at the first semester of your freshman year. If you failed a class, or 2, depending on how many you're enrolled in, you have to earn 9 credits by the start of second semester to be eligible second semester. I would highly recommend passing all of your classes and earning all of the credits you're enrolled in. This is not something we advocate, but it is definitely just a fallback for freshmen who really do struggle that first semester. One caveat is although the 9 credits is the only requirement for freshmen, once a student accumulates 24 credits, then the grade point requirement kicks in. And the minimum grade point, once you have 24 credits, is a 2.0 GPA. It's a C average, which you might think, oh, C average, no big deal. I was a B student or an A student in high school. It's a lot harder to get A's and B's in college, okay? So if you are coming in with, let's say, 12 or 15 AP credits or youth options credits or credits by exam, however you earn those credits, if your total at the end of first semester will be more than 24 earned credits, you're going to need to have a 2.0 GPA going into the spring semester to stay eligible in the spring. So just know that applies to maybe a few of you in here, maybe more, depending on how many credits you have. For sure, by the start of your sophomore year, you need to have 24 credits and that 2.0. And then every year after, you just add 24 more credits. So you need to be moving toward a degree at UW-Eau Claire to stay eligible in athletics and maintain that 2.0 GPA. Does anyone have any questions about that eligibility? Again, these are our minimum standards. Our department GPA this past year was a 3.13 as a whole, so our athletes do really well. I'm going to brag about Coach Huntington's team. Her softball team had a 3.49 average. So we have outstanding student athletes. On the whole, less than 5% of our athletes are struggling and in a scenario where they might be ineligible. Don't be in the 5%. Be in the 95% that's doing really, really awesome for our department. All right. The last thing to talk about, we do not have redshirting in Division III. So when you start your full-time semester this fall, you will start what equates to, you maybe have heard it at the Division I level, the clock, when your clock starts. We don't have a clock in Division III as far as a 5-year clock. What we have is a 10-semester rule. You have 10 full-time semesters to use 4 seasons of eligibility. This might be important to you if you at any time decide to take a year off. So for example, this year, let's say you decide, you know what, I'm just not going to play this sport, I'm going to get my feet wet. What happens then is that you still you'll use your first and then second semesters out of that 10, even though you're not competing. So you would then only have 8 semesters left to use your 4 seasons. There is medical hardship redshirting or medical redshirting still if you would qualify, and there's a lot of rules as far as you have to be injured in a certain time period in order to qualify. But there is not anything where you can't just be a practice player at UW-Eau Claire. You would use a season of eligibility if you practiced after the first date of competition here. Any questions on that? All right, I'm going to turn it over to Coach Huntington to finish us up.
One of the ways that we help our student athletes try to keep up, and this varies depending on the sport, but there are a few different ways that we work with our student athletes to monitor their academic progress. One is Coach Woody does a phenomenal job. She is meticulous with keeping track of credits, keeping track of GPAs, She goes through every single one of our student athletes' records with a fine-tooth comb, and if there is ever a problem, she's going to find it. So she does an amazing job with that. So that's one step that helps our student athletes stay on track. Another thing that we do department-wide is what are called academic progress reports. And those progress reports go out to our student athletes. We as coaches give them to our student athletes about the 6th or 7th week of the semester. Our student athletes in turn take those to their professors and ask them to fill them out, and then they're returned to us. And so at about midway through the semester, if there are going to be any red flags as far as any of our student athletes, hopefully we're going to see those because the professors will have provided that information to us. So that allows us a chance to meet with those individual student athletes then and say, hey, we need to come up with an action plan here how you're going to get better at this. Or, are you using a tutor? Are you going to the Academic Skills Center? What are the strategies that we can use here to make sure that you're successful in this class? So those are a couple of things department-wide. Other than that, different coaches will have different policies on study halls. My policy, for example, is one night a week, all year long. My freshmen are all required to attend a 2-hour study hall. And that's monitored by one of our coaching staff members who also then works to advise those student athletes as they prepare to schedule the next semester's classes. We have progress reporting within that itself so that they're reporting back to us on exam grades, quiz grades, homework assignment grades, and those types of things. Yeah, it's micromanaging, but if that's going to help ensure their future and graduating from college, then that's what we're willing to do. So there are just different ways that the different coaches are going to handle those things, but that's just one example. So as far as helping keep everybody on track and making progress toward getting your degree. These are our phone numbers if you want to jot those down. Otherwise, you can find them on our website. If you have any questions about anything at all, feel free to give us a call or shoot us an email. And we'll be happy to help in any way we can so that we can help make this transition as smooth as possible and get you off to a great start in your freshman year. The last slide up here is practice schedules. So if you want to take a look at those and jot those down, or if you have any specific questions about those, you can ask that as well.
Both of our offices are in the McPhee Phi Ed Center, and you can feel free to stop in anytime. Sometimes it's easier to talk to one of us if we're not your coaches. Sometimes it's easier to ask questions of us as opposed to your coach. But certainly your coach is a great resource, and we want you to make sure that you express any concerns to him or her as well. Thank you and good luck.
Thanks.